Hey there, I'm Yulia. I'm 28 years old, and I help out at my family's sweets shop. Our shop is in a rural area, so people often think it has a long history, but it actually started after the war. Despite being relatively new, our shop is well known. Our sweets are popular as local souvenirs at roadside stations and local events. So, even though we're a rural sweets shop, we don't have much trouble with business. At 28, I sometimes feel like an old lady appreciating the simple life in the countryside, and I have been content living in this land where I have lived since I was a child. The only complaint I had was the lack of opportunities to meet new people, but that problem has been solved. I'm not married yet, but I recently received a proposal from my boyfriend, Spencer. I plan to report it to my parents after we've greeted them. So when I'm talking with regular customers at the shop, I often have to swallow the words that are about to spill out. My fiancé and I have known each other since childhood, so our acquaintance goes back to kindergarten. Of course, back then we didn't think about romance or marriage, and we didn't become particularly close afterward either. We went to the same school until middle school, but from high school, we went our separate ways. I heard through the grapevine that my fiancé left the countryside to attend college, and since then, he had faded from my memory. However, about 2 years ago, we ran into each other at the station. "Oh, is that you, Spencer?" "Huh? Don't you remember? We were together from kindergarten to middle school. It's Yulia." "Oh, the sweets shop." We weren't particularly close, but because we were together for such a long time from kindergarten to middle school, I recognized him instantly. We approached each other, searching for traces of our younger selves, and then caught up on each other's recent lives. "Did you take over the sweets shop?" "I haven't taken over, but since my grandparents retired, my mom runs the shop now and I help out." "What about you, Spencer?" "After graduating from college, I worked in sales, but then my dad called me back." "Did something happen?" "Not really, but it seems he wants to make me a politician, so he's making me study for it." "That's right, your dad is a councilman, isn't he?" "Yes, my dad's dad was too, and his dad before him." "We're a family of politicians." "That's impressive. So you're going to become a politician soon?" "I don't know about soon. For now, I'm planning to find a sales job around here. You don't seem very enthusiastic about it." "If possible, I don't want to be one." "Seeing my parents, everything, I just want to work and live freely." "Why don't you tell him that?" "Going against my dad is impossible. Politics is such a closed-off field, and there's still this belief in our house that father's word is law. This is the countryside, so those values are still pretty strong here." Maybe it was because I was so happy to see him again, but we ended up talking for a long time. This is the countryside, so all my other acquaintances have left. That's why I was so happy to meet a familiar face after so long. Also, my fiancé must have felt relieved to meet someone familiar right after returning to his hometown. Reuniting with an old friend in our hometown after a long time, both of us were 26, the perfect age. Neither of us had a partner. With so many signs pointing in that direction, it would have been harder not to end up in a relationship. We started keeping in touch, gradually getting closer as friends for about a year, and then we started dating. A year after we began dating, he proposed, which happened recently, and today is the day my fiancé is coming to my house to ask for my parents' permission to marry. "Nice to meet you." "Thank you for having me." "Spencer, you went to the same middle school as Julia, right?" "Think of me as a friend's mom and feel free to relax. Since he's meeting my mom for our marriage greeting, I think that's difficult." Mom was smiling at the entrance as she offered him slippers, but my fiancé's face was tense. However, my mom, being a shop owner, has excellent communication skills. She's also warm and friendly. Once we started talking in the living room, My fiancé relaxed within about 10 minutes. It's impressive how you manage the shop. It's not just my effort. I get help from Julia, our employees, and many others. No, the shop runs because of your power. You're always working hard, running around everywhere. We don't have a father, so I have to work hard. But you always say you enjoy the work. The greeting with my mother went smoothly. My mother divorced when I was young, and my fiancé doesn't seem particularly concerned about the absence of my father, which is a relief. I plan to have him meet my grandparents soon, but there shouldn't be any issues there either. My grandparents have lived in the countryside, but they aren't stubborn people. Therefore, unless I bring someone really strange, they'll probably say you too can marry however you like. With the greeting to my mother done, the next step is to greet my fiancé's parents. My fiancé handled the greeting well, so I need to follow his example. But about greeting my parents, just ignore everything they say. Huh. What do you mean? As I was walking my fiancé out after greeting my mother, he said something I didn't understand. Looking at my fiancé, he seemed a bit downcast. I would find out what this expression meant a little later. The day after greeting my mother, I had some errands and went to the town hall with her. While talking to the person in charge at the counter, a man in his 60s suddenly cut in. "Hey, miss, give me a certificate." "We'll be with you shortly. Please wait a moment." "Huh? Are you putting me on hold?" The man leaned on the counter with one elbow, glaring at the female staff member. Judging by his clothes, he was wearing a fairly expensive suit. Seeing his attitude and outfit, I thought, could he be mafia? I was surprised at my own biased thought. That's how impactful this man was. "We don't mind waiting. We're not in a hurry." "I'm sorry, thank you." My mother smiled and gave up her place to the man. The staff member likely had to attend to us first due to her position. However, that might cause trouble with the man, so my mild-mannered mother, who dislikes trouble, voluntarily gave up her turn by saying, "We'll wait." The staff member could change the order of service. The clerk expressed her gratitude to my mother with her facial expression. "Do you have your ID card?" "I don't have that. Just hurry up and give it to me." "That's a problem. It's required by law." "Do you know who I am?" "I'll have you fired." I wanted to retort, "Who are you?" But saying that would ruin my mother's effort to keep things peaceful, so I swallowed my words. However, even without my saying anything, the man's demands were making my mother's effort futile. Just as I was thinking this would take a while, the clerk's supervisor came over. Hello, is there a problem?" "This young lady won't give me a certificate. She's useless. Fire her." "She's still young. Please be lenient." "I'll get it ready right away." The supervisor, with a light smile, went to the back. It seemed the supervisor was used to dealing with this man. I thought this would stop the man's behavior, but it didn't. "Miss, you can at least make some tea, right?" "I'm thirsty, so bring me some." The clerk looked clearly troubled. When my mother and I both nodded to indicate, "Go ahead," the clerk apologetically left her desk. I've never seen a real mafia member before. Although I had no evidence, in my mind this man was now definitely mafia. New experiences can be intriguing. I couldn't help but glance at him several times. Is there something on my face? No, I was just looking at the poster on the wall. The local festival poster? They spent a lot of money on that. It's just got the usual stuff like corn dogs and local sweets. Real country stuff. Yeah, that's right. The festival is something the locals look forward to every year, and my shop plans to sell fried Twinkies. I felt a bit irritated, as if he were mocking my hometown. Just then the clerk returned with the tea. The man, still leaning arrogantly on the counter, loudly sipped his tea while watching the interaction between the clerk and us. It didn't feel pleasant. Sensing my desire to leave quickly, The clerk hurried through the process. Once we finished, my mother and I left in a hurry. "See you later, ladies. I hoped we wouldn't meet again." Thinking this, I gave a slight nod as I looked back. As we headed to the exit, we heard the man's voice again. It seemed he was bothering the clerk again. I felt sorry for her, but there was nothing we could do except wait for the supervisor to return. He was quite a character. Don't mess with the gods and they won't mess with you. We should avoid getting involved, but I feel like I've seen him somewhere before. Do you know him by any chance? No way. As we left the town hall, my mother and I talked about the man, feeling relieved. I know it's rude to think we shouldn't get involved with someone we don't know well. However, since even my gentle mother had such a strong reaction, it can't be helped that I felt the same way. On the contrary, someone with such a strong impact makes you curious about who they are and what they do. My curiosity was soon satisfied unexpectedly. "Thank you. The customer just now was talking about how people raising children in this town find it hard to work. Before, he was saying that young people in this town in general find it hard to work. He seems so reliable, even though he only looks a bit older than me, like a dependable older sister. You should learn from her." Speaking of childcare and work, that man we saw earlier was something, wasn't he? Changing the subject again, I remember who that man was. Really, you do? He's a town councilman, a member of the town council. Really? That guy. His family has been politicians in this town for generations. Is this town okay with someone like him as a councilman? It seems that in rural councils it's hard to find candidates, so people like him aren't uncommon. Because of the shortage of candidates, most are in their 60s and mostly men. In this town, the average age is over 60, and 90% are men. Oh, that explains why the political world is so closed off and old-fashioned. Without new perspectives, you get people with the mindset of, "I'm the best because I'm a politician." You sure know a lot. It's what Spencer told me. Wait, a family of politicians? No way. Hearing my fiancé and my mother both mentioned a family of politicians gave me a bad feeling. However, despite the saying that the world is small, it's actually wide. Thinking there's no way that's possible, I quickly dismissed the unpleasant thought. Though the world is wide, the countryside is small, and coincidences seem to increase. So you're Spencer's fiancé? You're quite a beauty. I want to marry you myself. When we went to my fiancé's house to greet his parents, the man I never wanted to see again was lounging on the living room sofa. The man who was being so demanding at the town hall was my fiancé's father. Fortunately, or perhaps not, my future father-in-law Ralph didn't seem to remember meeting me at the town hall. Seeing his face, I felt my knees buckle inside. However, it's often said that first impressions can be misleading and that people might turn out to be nice once you get to know them better. Therefore, I decided I needed to know more about my future father-in-law. So your family runs a sweet shop. It must be tough to make a profit in the countryside. If you ever need money, you can always become my mistress. I've got plenty of money. My father-in-law spends about 8 out of every 10 minutes making vulgar remarks. The vulgar topics usually involve money and dirty jokes. Moreover, he occasionally mocks our shop, which is quite infuriating. As I nodded along with a strange smile, I finally understood why my fiancé told me to ignore everything they say. I like to think I'm good at finding the good in people. No matter how much I talk with my future father-in-law, I can't find any redeeming qualities. It's probably as difficult as finding a wild trout in a public pool. However, there isn't just one way to solve a problem. If my father-in-law is difficult, I can try to get along with my mother-in-law or ask her to address his crude behavior. I decided to give up understanding my father-in-law for now and talk to my mother-in-law. Holly, you're marrying Spencer. Spencer is going to be a politician, and you're just a rural sweets shop girl. Our family is a line of politicians, and now we're getting your dirty commoner blood. You better quit your job once you're married and support Spencer properly. Do you understand? Oh, this isn't going to work. Turns out both parents are a handful. I looked to my fiancé for help. He seemed just as stunned by his parents' words, his face slack and his eyes wide. He was probably escaping into another dimension out of embarrassment. As expected from my fiancé, he had given me the right advice on how to deal with his parents. I mentally checked out as well. It's debatable if it went well, but the greeting with his parents was over. As Spencer walked me home, he apologized, looking embarrassed. I'm sorry that was a shock, right? They think this town is their kingdom. Once we're married, I'll try to keep our interactions with them to a minimum. But please bear with the meeting and the wedding for now. It just means they take a lot of pride in their work and roles, right? That's a good thing. Some of what they said was tough, but don't worry about it. Spencer looked relieved and finally gave me a genuine smile, not the forced one from earlier. When I got home, I immediately told my mother about my father-in-law. Small towns sure are tight-knit. I thought the same. Spencer said he'd try to keep us from having to interact with them too much after we married. Even their own son is exasperated with them. But since they raised Spencer, they must have some redeeming qualities we just don't see. If we talk more, I'm sure those sides will show. Well, I'm not so sure about that. At first, I tried to find the good in my in-laws, but I couldn't find anything. However, maybe my mother, unlike me, could find something good about them. If that happens, I might be able to deepen my relationship with them too. It's a bit lazy of me, but I decided to rely on my mother for this. From then on, while preparing for the wedding, we also prepared for the family meeting. As the day of the meeting approached, I got more and more nervous about seeing my in-laws again. My mother, on the other hand, hummed as she wiped the display cases, seeming not to be worried at all. It felt like she wasn't taking it seriously enough. But given her calm nature, she probably wouldn't get as irritated or disappointed as I did by their crude words. I decided to stop worrying about others and focus on my own concerns. On the day of the family meeting, my mother and I headed to the restaurant Spencer had reserved. We were shown to the room by the staff, where Spencer and his parents were already seated. When they saw us enter, my father-in-law stood up and walked over to us. "Nice to meet you. You must be Yulia's mother." "On what?" "Oh, yes. Hey, you remember they're just a sweets shop." "That's right." "Sorry, it's just a habit." "Please have a seat." "Thank you." I thought my father-in-law was going to greet us politely, but he suddenly handed my mother his business card. Apparently, he wanted to make sure we knew he was a councilman. It also seemed like my mother-in-law was mocking us for being a sweets shop. But since we hadn't even sat down yet, I decided to let it slide. The business card had a photo of my father-in-law looking very pleasant. He seemed like a different person compared to the one in front of us. It was likely a miracle shot. By the way, I brought some of our shop's sweets. Please have them. My mother offered the sweets with a smile. Though my in-laws seemed to look down on us for running a sweets shop, I hoped that tasting our sweets would change their minds. However, my in-laws were a step ahead. My father-in-law silently handed the box of sweets to my mother-in-law. She opened the wrapping under the table and began inspecting the contents right there. After checking, she whispered to my father-in-law, "Oh, thank you very much. We tend to forget the taste of commoners, so this helps. It's important for politicians to know what you all eat. But next time, a little more thought would be appreciated. Honey, it's rude to speak to commoners like that." "Is it?" "Well, they need to understand proper manners." Yes, I understand. My mother seemed unusually irritated by the unpleasant talk about money. Sitting next to me, her hands were restlessly clenching and unclenching under the table. I had never seen her like this before. It's often said that when calm people explode, they become unmanageable. Maybe my mother was that type too. Unaware of my growing anxiety, my in-laws continued their rampage. How much do these sweets sell for? A box of 6 costs $26. We used to sell them for less, but with the recent rise in costs, we had no choice but to raise the price. Did you hear that? Commoners think $26 is expensive. Honey, that's rude. Linda here makes only a few dimes of profit per piece. Is that how the sweets business works? Such a small-time operation. How do you even make a living? We manage because people say our sweets are delicious and keep buying them. Isn't that just flattery, pretending to like it out of politeness? If I receive these, that's what I do. Under the table, my mother started pulling and stretching her fingers like she was doing stretches. She seemed more irritated after having our prized sweets mocked. I signaled my fiancé with my eyes to stop his parents' rampage, but he was sitting directly across from me and couldn't see my mother's hands. My signals didn't get through to him as he didn't know what was happening. Realizing this, I thought I had no choice but to intervene in the conversation, but it seemed I was a step too late. I may have commoners' dirty blood, but I'll endure it and accept it. Instead, once we're married, Julia can quit her job and fully support Spencer, who's going to be a politician. From a rural sweet shop girl to a politician's wife, you got lucky, huh? Is being a politician really such a prestigious job that you can look down on others? Of course, because it's a politician. Oh, what's wrong? As my in-laws mocked me, my mother's restless hands suddenly stopped. She smoothly moved my father-in-law's business card from the edge of the table to the center. Everyone's eyes followed her movement, wondering what she was about to do. My mother then picked up her teacup. I thought she was going to drink it and then say something, but she poured the tea over the business card instead. What are you doing? She slammed the teacup down on the table. The photo of my father-in-law on the card was now soaking wet. My mother glared at him. It was as if she had thrown water directly in his face. I was shocked to see my usually calm mother do something like this, but she didn't seem to have lost her cool completely. I think she wanted to throw the tea directly at my father-in-law and mother-in-law. However, doing so would have gotten her charged with assault. If they claimed to be burned, it could have led to an injury charge. That's why she poured the tea on the business card instead. Pouring tea on it is practically a declaration of war. Naturally, my in-laws were furious. Do you realize our family has been politicians here for generations? Your shop sells products at roadside stations and events, right? I'll tell the authorities to pull everything out. I hope your shop goes under and you regret this. Generations of politicians here, so what? Do you know about our ancestors? My mother remained calm, but was clearly very angry. Mentioning our ancestors, something she usually avoids, was proof of that. What? I don't know anything about the ancestors of a small sweets shop. If it had a history of over 100 years, maybe, but don't get cocky with a shop that started after the war. This is the first time I've been treated so rudely. I'll make sure your shop goes out of business. Don't think you can do business around here anymore. Is that so? Then I'll make sure to pull you down from your position as politicians. Are you planning to run for office? It's useless. Don't bother. Elections cost money, and how do you plan to steal votes from someone who's been a councilman for so long? Julia, we're leaving. My mother left the room and I followed her. As we exited, the staff began bringing in the lavish food. It felt like a waste, but there was nothing we could do. As we left the restaurant, my fiancé caught up with us. "I'm really sorry about today. I'll cut ties with my parents. Please, please let me marry Yulia." He apologized to my mother and expressed his intention to marry me, apologizing deeply. How could such a decent child come from those two? Maybe it's because they learned what not to do by watching their parents. Honestly, I think that's it. I've seen so much of their bad behavior. With my mother's approval for our marriage, the tense atmosphere lightened a bit. "I think I'll teach your parents a little lesson if that's okay." Actually, I've been thinking about that. If you can really pull my father down from his position, I'd appreciate it. My fiancé gave his approval for taking action against his parents. This might mark the end for my in-laws. About 6 months have passed since the family meeting. The wedding is coming up soon, but before that it's time for the town council elections. Normally the same familiar faces fill the seats and no new candidates appear, resulting in an uncontested election. However, this time there's a bit more buzz than usual. Elections happen everywhere, and they were over before I knew it. While my mother and I were at the shop as usual, my father-in-law and mother-in-law stormed in, shouting, "What did you do? Please don't raise your voice in the shop. There are no customers right now, so it's fine. I don't think that's the issue. What's going on? Why did I have to lose? And I'm the only one who lost. It's ridiculous. And to lose to that young woman? It's unacceptable." My mother and I exchanged glances and couldn't help but laugh. It seemed my in-laws really didn't understand why my father-in-law lost. It looks like I'll have to explain it step by step. The young woman you're talking about is 36 and ran for the first time, right? My mother supported her. She's a regular customer at our shop and always said this town could be more livable. She was interested in politics but didn't know how to get started, so she turned to my mother for help. "What? There's no way a sweets shop support could win an election. You must have used some dirty tricks. Please don't be rude. I only helped as a volunteer. I didn't take any money, and our actions were within the limits set by the election laws. There was no election fraud. Even so, it didn't look like she was doing any campaigning. Where did she get the votes, and what about the money? Campaigns cost a fortune. If you covered the costs, that's a problem. I told you we didn't break any laws. The reason it didn't look like she was campaigning is that she used social media to share her policies. She focused on online campaigning with DMs, videos, and her website. There were no street speeches or campaign cars. After deducting the refund of the deposit and public funds, she spent less than $4,000. An online campaign? How could she win with just $4,000 when it normally costs hundreds of thousands? How did I lose to that? My in-laws, unable to adapt to new ideas and stuck in their old ways, were in shock. But there have been instances where younger candidates used social media to win elections. My grandparents are in their 80s, but they embrace new values and are mindful of their language when dealing with customers. My mother, at 54, is even more flexible. She believed this method was best to help the young regular win the election. Wait, there were other candidates. How did she specifically take my votes? It doesn't make sense. You seem to have forgotten, but we've seen you behave arrogantly at the town hall. You've been doing whatever you want outside, too, and the townspeople's opinion of you was terrible. So we had her post on social media about improving the outdated council. It wasn't direct, but those who understood knew it meant getting rid of arrogant councilmen. This created a buzz to get you out, and since it was coming from a young woman, people wanted to support her. The excitement grew beyond our expectations. The power of the internet is scary. My mother, pleased with the result, explained to my in-laws with a satisfied look. However, she hadn't mentioned the most crucial point yet. Social media alone couldn't have achieved this outcome. My mother's involvement was significant. Since my mother didn't want to bring this up, I decided to explain. There's another big reason why my mother could gather so much support and be so knowledgeable about elections. You don't have to say that. No, it needs to be said. Our ancestors were landowners in this area. We lost most of the land during the land reforms, and that's when we started this sweets shop. That's why our shop's history isn't very long. Despite being a relatively new sweets shop, we have many valuable documents about the area's history. We lend these to the town hall out of my mother's goodwill. We also lend the remaining land to the town for a children's park for free. This is also thanks to my mother's goodwill. So you're connected to the town hall. Exactly. While you were acting high and mighty without doing anything substantial, you missed out on this information. Unlike you, we built a trusting relationship without wielding power. Because of that, we heard all the bad things about you, making it easy to plan. And knowing that my mother supported her made it easy for the candidate to gain trust. Many regular customers supported her. The momentum to get you out grew so much that we didn't need to do anything more. As I spoke, my mother fidgeted shyly. My father-in-law loves to wield his power as a politician, but my mother is not like that. Therefore, she doesn't like to talk about us being former landowners or lending out documents and land. It's her modesty that earns her trust from others. Because of the trust she has from the townspeople, my mother often gets asked to help with various things. One of those tasks included helping with elections. Due to her knowledge of the area and this time, her experience and the advertising strategies from our sweets shop were useful too. Bad luck next time. I'm not sure, but isn't the next election in 2 years? Young people need to be countered with young people. Next time, I'll have Spencer run. Your marriage is off. Why do you get to decide both my career and my marriage? Spencer, were you here? My fiancé stepped out from the back of the shop, surprising his parents. It shouldn't be a surprise since we're about to get married and this place will be his in-laws' home. It's the weekend, so my fiancé was off work and had come to the shop. He was just watching the artisans make sweets in the back, not hiding. Didn't I say I'd cut ties with you after the family meeting? I've cut ties, so stop forcing me to become a politician, and you don't have the right to stop the wedding. Cut ties? You're joking, right? You were just angry and said that in the heat of the moment. Don't marry someone like that. We're a family of politicians. You have to become one too. I believe being a politician is an honorable job, but being a politician doesn't make you inherently superior. It's those who work diligently as politicians who are respected. I don't think you're admirable at all, sitting on your high horse, wielding your power. Do whatever you want. I'll make sure this shop goes under. My in-laws stormed out, throwing out threats. They still seemed to believe this town was their kingdom. Having already spoken with people at the town hall, I had a sense of what would happen next. They would soon realize their mistake. After being ousted from his council seat, my father-in-law faced a slew of accusations for power harassment and sexual harassment. There were even reports of embezzling campaign funds from another council member. Some council members were troubled by my father-in-law's tyranny. However, because my father-in-law came from a long line of politicians, he had a lot of undue power, making it difficult for them to fight back. That's why they saw this as their opportunity. While there were council members with a sense of justice, some shared my father-in-law's outdated views. I worried that those members might try to protect him. However, they had their own issues with power harassment and sexual harassment. They didn't want the fallout to reach them, so they stayed silent and watched. My father-in-law was abandoned by everyone and left without help. There was no way he could return to the council. However, my father-in-law likely saved a lot of money as a politician. He won't be able to live comfortably on that money anymore. With the continuous accusations, the damage he'll owe will be enormous. How much money will he have left in the end? There's also the possibility of criminal charges. If that happens, it will affect any other job opportunities they might seek. More importantly, my in-laws have lost the title they thought was unbeatable, politician. This was the biggest shock for them. Since my fiancé has declared that he will not become a politician, the political family title ends with my father-in-law's generation. In this situation, my in-laws have lost all motivation and, being looked at with disdain outside, have become recluses. Meanwhile, my fiancé and I got married. Of course, my in-laws did not attend the wedding. After the wedding, we headed to the town hall. The clerk greeted us with a big smile. This alone shows how much better the work environment has become. The disappearance of my father-in-law and the success of the woman my mother supported are clear signs. My fiancé and I submitted our marriage registration. With that, we are officially husband and wife.